Hi, welcome to this week's edition of News Up. Again, John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back at all of the Pro 14 fixtures from 2 weeks ago. Look back on the European Cup final, which was last weekend, and of course, look forward to Leinster's game against Zebre and also Ireland's game against Italy this weekend. So, lads, lots to get through. So let's start off with our game against Bennett and Treviso. We won 37-25. It was a good game from memory, which seems a long time ago. But like they kind of pushed us hard, but I suppose we just came out strong in the end.
Wait a minute, we played Treviso, did we? No, it was an enjoyable. It was a close game. Close. It was close enough. The scoreboard alone will tell you that. But they were never out of. We were never out of sight. It was in the balance right up till the last. They always give you a good go, Treviso. I mean, even back in 2010 and 2011, I don't know, you probably remember Johnny dropping a goal to get us out of jail. I think that was 2011.
I think that was the first. Wasn't that the first game in the Pro 14 or the Pro 12 as well?
I think they were in the previous season, was it?
Not sure.
Anyway, it was either, if it wasn't their first game, it was the first game of their second season. And we were very lucky to get away with the spoils on that occasion. So it's not like this is a new thing. I mean, the Italian sides get talked down quite a lot and ridiculed. And I suppose Zebre/Ironi have possibly deserved that a little bit more than Treviso, but even they have improved significantly in the time they've been on. But Treviso, I suppose Treviso always had a pedigree in the Heineken Cup, etc. But nowadays, look, didn't they brown the trousers of one of the big? Was it Northampton? And a couple of years in a row, they've given Premiership teams a hard run in the Heineken Cup a couple of games in a row, a couple of years in a row. So they're no slouches, and beating them over there is and there was a crowd too. Not very nice. There's never a very big crowd there, but there was a reasonable crowd. There was a few hundred there allowed in to see the game.
It was interesting that you said like we never got out of reach, we never set out, like we never went into the distance. But at the same time, were they ever really in reach? It was kind of, there was always a relatively comfortable gap kept between the two teams.
Yeah, it was 18-20 after 45 minutes. So like they weren't that.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to denigrate them, but I think what I mean is that when the chips were down, we were able to just keep them at arm's length. Because we did have a very good team. We did have a relatively strong team there.
Absolutely.
It was one of those games. I mean, for some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it's just the time of year, or maybe it's just, I don't know. But when we win those games, I mean, you know what I always say about games against Italian teams, but they're always eminently forgettable.
That one wasn't bad, man.
No, it wasn't a bad game, but at the same time, you forgot about it as soon as it was over, kind of thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the one person who didn't forget about it was Jordan Larmour. He got a bad doing. Like he's out for 16 weeks, latest report. So maybe he might come back a bit sooner than that, hopefully. But dislocated his shoulder and looked in a lot of discomfort and pain when he was coming off the pitch.
Yeah, that's not good.
That was unfortunate for him. I mean, obviously with coming into the resumed Six Nations campaign, the Eight Nations campaign, and a whole season of rugby ahead of him, and now he's kind of had to take this enforced break after already having had to take an enforced break due to the original lockdown. It's something. The dislocations are something you have to be careful with. It's not like the old days where you just used to pop it back in and carry on kind of thing. I mean, there's a lot more awareness of muscle damage and ligaments, stuff like that, to make sure that once it goes back in, it stays back in instead of becoming something that, you don't want to end up like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 2, where you can pop it out at will.
Definitely not. The more manipulation you have, the more easier it pops out, with a lot of injuries. Once it gets used to popping out, it's very hard to. It seems to pop out easier every time. It's unfortunate to get injured, but it is going to give an opportunity to a lot of younger guys, and maybe Cian Kelleher, who has been. We haven't seen much game time in the season. Like he's back over a season now, and we haven't seen a whole lot of him, which is surprising. Good player. And for Ireland, I was wondering who was going to be full back for Ireland, because he looked like he was being put into the position of incumbent. And now we've got Stockers starting, and we've also got, like, I would have put Conway in probably, but he's in the back three, and Hugo Keenan was the other option. So it's like we put all three full backs out for a test against Italy to see who gets the gig against France or something. I don't know what we're
I think perhaps part of the problem for King Kelleher is Leinster don't and traditionally haven't used strike runners. I mean, he's your typical strike running, try scoring winger, and that's not kind of the winger that we use. We're a bit lucky with James Lowe that he can do that, but the real value of James Lowe to Leinster is all the other stuff he does.
Mm. Yeah, he is a hungry chap for rooking and generally attacking people.
He got his third try of the season, so he's obviously in a rich vein of form, continuing it on. I can't remember the actual number of tries he scored in his 3 years here, but he must be kind of tipping up the charts a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. When does he? I believe it's in early November is about the best. What game does he qualify for Ireland? I know he's training with Ireland, but he's not qualified for either of the Six Nations games. But do anybody know the exact date he's qualified for? No. We'll have to look that up before next week. I think my memory is he was playing with Tasman, and they had a final or a semi-final, and he stayed with them to finish out the season. So he didn't get here till maybe the 10th or the 12th of November. So I'd say it might be the second game of the Eight Nations that he's available for, which is scheduled, I believe. So who is it we've got? I'll check it and come back to you.
Yeah. Well, we'll just tip through the other results, I suppose, from that weekend. So Munster came through that game against Edinburgh 25-23. I was watching that game. I was watching that game, and I think I had to leave, and they were, been resoundingly beaten. And then by the time I came back, I saw that they had won. I was like, bloody hell, what happened there?
Got out of jail again. They're making a habit of it.
In fairness to them, I think it was a jail that got into themselves. So I thought most were pretty decent actually against Edinburgh. Edinburgh, there's something that Cockerell's going to have to sit them boys down and have a wee chat with them, because since losing that game against Ulster, they've just gone to pot.
Mm. Yeah.
Sometimes that can have an effect. A loss like that, a loss that is both obviously a loss on the pitch, but a psychological thing as well. That can have long-term effects on teams. We've seen it before. We saw it with Northampton. We've seen it with other teams as well. That it's very hard. With Ulster, yeah, it's very hard to stop a ship from sinking. And so he's going to have to sit those boys down and have a wee chat with them, because they're playing with like a team that has kind of a form of rugby PTSD after what happened against Ulster.
Yeah, for sure.
Another Irish result was Ospreys were beaten by Ulster 24-12 over in Swansea.
Kind of expect that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know. Ospreys, they're my new Cardiff. Don't forget.
With their new North Korean overlords.
Yeah, I think they might surprise a few people during the season. We'll see. I've been wrong before.
So the other result, Cardiff beat Connacht, unfortunately, 29-7.
Yeah, that wasn't a great day for Connacht, was it?
No, Connacht are quite inconsistent on occasion, and this was one of them. After a brilliant result the week before against Glasgow, they then go away and lose against Cardiff. But Cardiff are one of those teams that can blow hot and cold. They can be, the coming team, or they can be a team past its best on occasion. So you never really know Cardiff.
That's true. I've just looked it up. The 13th of November is Ireland v Wales in the first game of the new competition, Eight Nations, as we seem to be calling it. I have a feeling that James Lowe might sneak that one. If he doesn't, he'd definitely be qualified for the next week. It's on or about that date that he arrived in Ireland, so you never know. He could tug out against Wales or at least be on the bench.
Yeah.
And he can play. He's played fullback, not recently or not for Leinster that I can remember. Maybe he's moved there during the game, but he's definitely played fullback for the Maori. That I've
He won't be
seen.
playing fullback for Ireland.
Be on the bench for Ireland. You won't be coming straight into the team, lads. It doesn't
Whether
work
he's in
like
the
that.
team or whether he's on the bench, he still won't be playing fullback.
No.
He's just saying he's option there. That's all. As are the three that are starting in the back three this weekend. You know, Hugo Keenan seems to me the most natural fullback that we've got. Stockdale's a winger who can play fullback. Andy Conway is pretty good at fullback too, but again, he's kind of a winger who can play fullback.
When was the last time Andy Conway played fullback?
Estimation. Excellent question, Dave.
Senior Cup?
I don't know. I've seen him play fullback for Munster, surely.
Has he?
Yeah, pretty sure he has. Yeah, but yeah, he's not bad there from memory. But yeah.
All right, we'll come back to the Ireland discussion later, lads.
Yeah.
So there was just a couple of other results just to rattle them off. Glasgow beats Scarlets 20-7.
I watched that game because remember I said there a couple of weeks ago, oh, that'll be a good game to watch, really good game. Glasgow against Scarlets, two teams thrown out. It was rubbish, utter rubbish. It was one of the worst games of 2020.
Okay, glad I missed it. So.
Well, it was a high scoring game then. Dragons against Zebra. That was 26-18. I think I saw a little bit of that actually. That was on the Friday night, wasn't it?
It was the only game.
I think I was just flicking. Yeah, I think so. And I watched a little bit of it, and it wasn't anything to write home about from memory. Anyway, so last weekend was the final of the Champions Cup. So
what?
Exeter. What?
The final of the what? Was there rugby on last weekend?
Not see it, John. You must have missed it, did you?
No,
so
I saw
Exeter, obviously. Yeah, so Exeter Racing. Like they obviously Exeter came through 31-27. But Racing decided to look for feet, hands, heads, and everything to shoot themselves in before they threw that game away.
Yeah, they could have. And Mr. Zebo had a good game, and off the back of which everybody seems to be touting him for Ireland, saying he's just, he'd walk into an Irish team at the moment, at which the words would, his, and in, and bollocks could be put into that sentence. But anyway, people seem to love him as a hobby horse and seem to feel he was hard done by Joe.
It's not, I couldn't agree more with you.
So,
I was going to say that.
The current.
Sorry, go on.
I'm just saying, like, he's just the current filler of the foreign player we should be picking shirt.
Yeah,
there's
like
always been one.
I've listened to the Off the Ball guys. Jerry Gilroy's continually going on about him. I listened to the RTE podcast again. Their pundits all, except with the exception of Fiona Coughlin, actually, in fairness to her, even Birch was he was starting to, his mind was starting to be turned. But like, what do they expect? They were saying, but there's very few players. Like, what would happen if Furlong decided to go and join Exeter or Saracens? What would happen if James Ryan or Ryan Bennett or CJ Standers decides to go off and play in France? Like, are they going to make exceptions for those lads as well, so that our entire frontliners are away? Like, crazy argument. You can forget. Like a few months ago, or about a month ago, 2 months ago, when Leinster were beaten and resoundingly beaten by Saracens, there was the league is not fit for purpose, and the Irish provinces aren't strong enough. So, like, if you're going to take away all of our frontline players and let them play abroad, sure, is that going to strengthen our week in the Irish provincial teams?
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense.
Couldn't agree more with you, Jason. I think it's the only card that we have that keeps people playing in Ireland. Like if you start okay, they made an exception for Johnny Sexton, and that's pretty much it in the last 10 years. I mean, I know we had Jordan Murphy, Tommy Bowe, a few people like that, but generally since 2010 or so, there haven't been very many players, if any, other than Johnny that I can think of off the top of my head, who've been made an exception for. And once you start, it's a slippery slope, like you just said, Jason. Tyke Furlong goes, CJ Stanley, whoever, they're gone. If they go, they go, and you gotta stick to your guns, because otherwise there won't be provincial rugby, and it's a cycle. It's a declining circle, and everybody remembers how shit it was having Johnny playing for us when he was. You had to go back and play a game during the Six Nations on the rest week. How sick was Joe Schmidt when that happened.
Yeah,
I think a better example is just the League of Ireland. That's just the only example you need.
absolutely.
Anyone who says it to you, just say 3 words to the League of Ireland.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And another example that I think it was Ger Gilroy, but I could be wrong on that. He was saying, well, look at the players that are playing, and he said, Zebo, Ryan, and he even said Sean O'Brien. And I was listening to it going, Sean O'Brien's probably played about 3 games for London Irish. Like, he was great when he played for Leinster, and he played 10 years, and gave his heart and soul for the club and his country. But like, his day is done.
Yeah.
He's been injured consistently, and life
But
and time catches up with all of us. And
here's what we're talking about, all these guys, right? None of them mentioned the 2 guys with gold medals around their necks.
go on.
Whitten and Steenson. They really are they're literally talking through their holes, because, if you're going to talk about, there are these players who are abroad and they're brilliant. Well, can you be much more brilliant than actually winning the European Cup? And they didn't mention them. So they're actually talking out of their arses.
it's called select, it's just certain players will always gonna, and like, let's face it, when Joe Schmidt decided not to pick Simon Zebo when he went to France.
Before he went to France.
Who slotted in? Yeah, before he went to France, you did, right? But who slotted in his place and became the leading try scorer in the Six Nations? Stockdale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he was the form winger in the championship that season. When Simon was, I'm sure you remember it, but I remember the semi-final that Munster played against Leinster in the Pro 14 and the RDS, and it was the Simon show. And if he I don't know how many balls he threw into touch, looked disinterested and overweight, and then by the end of the match, it was all about him lying on the ground, prostrate, crying, as if it was Munster's decision not to re-sign him, instead of his decision to go and probably double his salary and go to play in France.
Yeah.
Also, I agree with everything you say, Jay. I wouldn't even, to be perfectly honest with you, taking it onto the level where we're actually discussing actual players. It doesn't matter. The policy is right. It doesn't matter who the player is.
But Dave, it's so frustrating. It's almost like going back 10 years ago when George Hook was on the TV, and you've a lot of floating voters who wouldn't be as knowledgeable and just enjoy watching rugby for what it is, wouldn't necessarily know the politics of it or how it's run or the internal structures within the IRFU, and they listen to a few people on podcasts or on the radio station, and they just say, well, that guy probably knows a bit more about it than I do, and that's the opinion I'm going to have because Ger Gilroy says it, or Wes, whatever his name. In fairness, I don't think he was that strong about it, but Hugh Cahill said it, or whoever is getting. So, like, it's frustrating that these people are still getting airtime.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is very frustrating to hear about, as I say, whether it was Simon Zebo or Tyke Byrne before him, if you remember when he was at Scarlets, or Robin Copeland before that, or whoever was the cause celebrity du jour, right? It's very annoying because we know why it's done, and we know the reasons behind it, and we know the benefits to it, and they far outweigh, to a certain extent, even though they had little or no choice. The IRF did make a rod for their own back when they selected Sexton. because it's the stick that's been used to beat them. And that's, to a certain extent, that's why the IRFU have been very clever in saying, what rule? There's no rule. We don't have a rule. There's no rule. There's nothing to say that Andy Farrell can't select Simon Zebo next week. He'd be sacked. But there's nothing to say that he can't select him. So the IRFU have actually been very clever about it. But the other side of that is it does make a rod for their own back when the exception tests the rule or the policy.
Anyway, I am the one. I'll put my hand up. I derailed this conversation by
Yes, you did. Anyway, did anyone think watching Leicester Exeter it was like watching Leinster, only a slight bit better at the moment?
Yeah, well, it was a bit
exactly the same way as we did.
Oh, geez, I disagree with you, Dave. I really do. Like, I don't think that we don't think our pack plays that way at all. Like, we don't take tap penalties to ourselves and like some team that it's a throwback to 1970s rugby. I find it. I'll call it puke rugby. I really don't enjoy watching the way Exeter play.
I think a lot of what Leinster does is it's funny you mentioned the 70s, because in soccer in the 70s there was a school of thought called POMO, position of maximum opportunity, right? And basically what that meant was teams hammered the ball into the box, right? It was long ball football. But the idea was that most goals were scored from within the penalty area. So that was the position of maximum opportunity. Obviously, most tries are scored from within, the 5 to 10 meter area from the line. And a lot of what Leinster does is all about getting into that position and then putting together 19 and 20 phase sets to get over the line. And that's what Exeter do as well. They both. Now, you might argue that Leinster get into that position a different way than Exeter, but ultimately the end game is the same, to get up to the line and create 19 and 20 phase sets until the opposition makes a mistake, runs out of men, gets caught in the blind, particularly against the French team who aren't used to that kind of number of phase plays. And I thought
I would say
similar to
Exeter remind me of Munster in the early noughties.
No, they win.
That's what they are. Well, I think Munster had a few days of success as well. That's the time that I don't think they go really. They have a few exciting players in their backfield that, I honestly have to say, I didn't realize Hogg was playing in the game.
You certainly realized Finn Russell was playing. I would have to say that you might want to strap yourselves in, but to defend Munster and the style of rugby they played, there was a time, maybe particularly when Gaffney was in charge, where Munster actually played some really, really good rugby. They had this move that they did a lot, and they used to take quick ball off the top of a line-out, maybe in and around their own 22, and O'Gara would hit skip pass to Mullins, who used to drift outside his man, and they used to make big yardage that way. And it was all based on, really good line-out ball, brilliant pass from O'Gara, and Mullins Mullins was great with his hips, he was able to get outside a guy. Munster in that phase of time, we'd say between 2002 and 2007, actually played a lot of good rugby. Problem was that they didn't actually really win anything. Well, 2006, sorry. It was only in 2006 when they kind of throttled that back a bit that they started to be successful. But anyway, that's a divergent thing.
I wouldn't be so down on Munster either. Like, they played to their strengths. They had the Irish pack and the Irish line. They were some serious dudes in that pack. We can all name them to this day, and it was pretty much the pack that won the Grand Slam in 2009. Lots of other teams in European rugby saw them coming and went, "Oh, for God's sake, we have to play against an international bloody pack." They just had a swagger about them that they could kick the ball in the corner and didn't care who you were, how big you were, they were going over the line. And I know what you mean, Jason. They did.
Munster had a back row with David Wallace, Alan Quinlan, and Anthony Foley, right? There are teams that wouldn't have footballers that good in their centres. Those three could play football any which way you wanted to.
Yeah. And Munster were playing to their strengths by going for that kind of kick for the corner stuff and bullying your way over the line. Like, you can't fault them for that. They were fabulous.
I'm not faulting them. I don't enjoy it.
And Exeter.
That's a fair enough point as well, yeah.
Well, that's true, yeah. But Exeter, I think I enjoy watching Exeter. Okay, you can get a bit much of the mauled over try, especially when they score 3 or 4 of them. you know, it's not as pretty as a beautiful backs move, or you know, but hey, they're doing what they do, and I agree with Dave that we actually do play quite a lot like that. Okay, we might have a bit more variation in our play than they do, but you know, if we could score a try every time we got a 5 meter scrum or every time we got a line out with it, you know, we'd be doing that as well. Like if you get a score, whatever way you get a score, you know.
We're winning the line out every time we got a line out.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've never had a pack. We've never had a pack that could, you know, dominate at a scrum and take penalties off the French scrum. You know,
2012.
well, that's not the way we play rugby.
No, but we've had a pack that can dominate in the loose, and we still do have a pack that can dominate in the loose.
Yeah,
We're
to a certain
fitter
extent.
than a lot of these players.
Like, you know, you dominate your set pieces rather than in the loose. Like it's the, you know, we've never had a dominant scrum, and we very rarely win opposition lineout, even though we have the tallest player in the league. Like, you know, we lose quite a significant proportion of lineouts.
I would say in 2012, Jason, we had the best
Like,
pack in loose or tight.
Well, we had a very dynamic team. Yeah, you know, we had Keane Healy was on fire. That's John O'Brien was absolutely excellent.
But we saw kind of, I mean, Racing Metro came out with their Dicky Bows, or Racing 92 as they are now, came out with their Dicky Bows and kind of the old tradition of, you know, Racing Paris. And why didn't they take the drop goal?
Yeah, why didn't they take the points instead of going up the line?
Yeah,
and like they subsequently I think they got held up over the line, but still they didn't convert it. And
you think maybe,
you know, and like even if you're playing under 13s or junior Bs, the psychological damage that like you mentioned, Edinburgh's psychological damage, been beaten by Ulster in that semi-final. The psychological damage during a game of you having possession, you're 5 meters out, and you've decided to spurn 3 points and go for 5 or hopefully 7, and the psychological fill up that the defending team gets for holding out and winning that battle, for that 3-minute battle that they've succeeded in doing, and the 3 minutes that you've tried your hardest and you failed, that gets in the back of your head. Because the next time you go down there, you're not as confident to make those decisions.
And also, you're playing right into Exeter's hands, because that's their game, that tight mauling game. You know,
do you think the injury to Ibrahim affected the decision around kicks? He's their go-to guy for kicks, and then he went off. Obviously, he went off in the first half, but they wouldn't have had that confidence in Finn Russell or whoever else that they had in Teddy Ibrahim.
So, okay, lads. So, turning our attention to this weekend's fixtures, we'll kick off with the Pro 14 or Pro 12 first, as it's probably going to be now for the foreseeable future. We obviously take on Treviso as we're recording this on Thursday evening. We know the team that has been selected. It's a very nice looking youthful team that Leinster have picked.
Yeah, it's a nice mix. Dave Kearney gets is probably the oldest man in the back line anyway, which I always think of him as a kid. So he's I think he's about 29, 30 now.
It's actually a very experienced pack. You've got Dooley there, who's got a lot of caps. If you think about it, you've got Dooley, you've got Bent, you've got Ross Maloney, Devin Toner, and Rhys Ruddock. You know, that's a good, strong, experienced spine. Then you've got Luke at 9. You've got Harry Byrne at 10, who's got a fair few games, and you've got Dave Carney and Kieran Frawley in there, who also racked up a few caps at this stage. So there's actually a lot more. When you look at the team, you think, oh, that's a very young team. But you see guys like Liam Turner there, who hasn't, you know, he's making his debut. Dan Sheehan is making his debut. You've got David Hawkshaw on the bench. So whilst it looks young, there's actually a really good, experienced core there.
Yeah, it's a good mix, all right. But it's good to see guys like Turner, Jimmy O'Brien getting his go at fullback. He's a guy who seems to be able to play right across the back five, and it's good to see him getting tested at full back, seeing as it seems to be a position of debate at the moment. The more guys you give a go there, the better. Who knows where the guy will end up, but could be full back, could be 13, could be anywhere. But yeah, I'm excited to see them actually. I know it's not necessarily a glamour fixture, but I'm excited to see them play and see what happens with them.
Isn't this the whole reason d'etre of the Pro 14 or Pro 12? Really,
Yeah.
And when you have 19 guys away or selected for Ireland in an extended squad, and then I think there's something like 9 or 10 in the starting 15 and 4 on the bench for Ireland, and then you can bring in and you can give, as you say, you've got fellas that you've got the Dave Carneys and the Luke McGraths who are trying to reestablish themselves in an Irish setting or been a first choicer for their club maybe. And then on the other hand, you've got young fellas coming through that are getting their first caps, but they're playing alongside old stagers like Toner and Bent on the first team that are kind of minding them and guiding them through, rather than these lads never get, like, if every game, if we went down the route of having the Gallagher Premiership style of competition, that every game is absolutely crucial and you can't take your foot off the gas for a minute, these lads would never get game time ever. You wouldn't see 4 new caps starting in the team.
No, not a chance. Interesting to mention as well that it's Toner's 250th cap. That's a very exclusive club that he's joining there, 250 caps.
Who else is in there?
Darcy, obviously.
Darcy, yeah.
Shaggy.
Shaggy. Is Shaggy in there? Yeah. Yeah, there's not. That's probably about it.
It is one of the things. I mean, ironically, some people complain about it as but it's one of the benefits, certainly for Leinster and Ireland, of the Pro 14, is that it does provide opportunities for young players to get elite level competition. I mean, the benefit from this game won't be seen at 10 o'clock tomorrow night. The benefit from this game is, maybe 12 months down the line or even further away, where the likes of Liam Turner is maybe starting in a Heineken Cup match, or maybe starting for Ireland in 2 years' time. That's what these games are about. These games are part of a progression pathway. They're not, to a certain extent, themselves, they're not the be all and end all, but they're part of a progression pathway. And if you don't have that first step on the path, you're going nowhere.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like this, it's these games. Like if you think of the team that's selected to play for Ireland at the weekend, I'm just looking through it. There's some fellas that kind of had stellar rises, have played only a handful of Leinster games and then suddenly got into the national squad because they're that good. I'm talking about the Ryans or, the Hugo Keenans or someone like that. But you've someone that's kind of, like look at, say Ross Byrne on the bench, for example. He's probably got 50 Leinster caps. And the reason why he got 50 Leinster caps, he started off getting those caps in these games against Zebre and the Dragons. Then he got the experience in those games that when he was needed to step up, because Johnny Sexton pulls out after 3 minutes against Exeter, or starts in a final even against Ulster in the Pro 14 a few weeks ago. He's got the experience under his belt and he can step up and do it, and then he can take his place on the bench and probably will come on at some stage to earn an Irish cap on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. The same with the likes of we say another guy who's starting, Will Connors. I mean, he got his opportunities through the likes of Sean O'Brien being away, Dan Levy, admittedly at the beginning of his career, and Josh McNeil at the beginning. Those guys were away with the Ireland squad, so he got his opportunity in this game, or in a game similar to it. And now he's starting for Ireland in the Six Nations. So it does provide an opportunity. And as I say, it's the first step on a pathway. And you don't know, in 2 years, Scott Penny could be starting for Ireland, or Liam Turner, or David Hawkshaw, or any of them. But you have to start somewhere. I mean, you look at a guy who was regarded as a staple, an absolute staple of the Leinster Pro 14 team. Didn't get a huge amount of game time or starts in Europe, but now he's on the bench tomorrow. Is Ed Byrne?
Yeah.
You know, these games were key in getting him up to a position where you could consider him for the bench in an international match.
You were saying about Ross Maloney having 50 Leinster caps. This is going to be 98, Jason, believe it or not.
And he was saying Ross Byrne.
Oh, Ross, sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's an example of a fella that, I mean, you never know, but I don't think he'll get an Ireland, or he might have got one on a tour, I don't know, or he might get one when they go on the Pacific Islands tour if that goes ahead at the end of the summer. But I can't see him getting into the Six Nations team over the next number of seasons. But the point remains that he's a very valuable team player that will play in games like this.
Big time.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, he's got nearly 100 caps. Of course, he's going and I'm sure, I don't know whether Ryan Baird would have got into the Ireland match day squad had he have not got injured. Let's say he didn't. Probably a good chance he might have played in this game for Leinster. But I'm sure having packing down beside a guy who's played 100 times for Leinster would have only been a benefit to him. You know, that would have aided him on his very early progression through the rugby ranks.
I often think of Ross Maloney as Leo Newitt. You know, he fills that role now in the Leinster squad. You know, he mightn't be a guy who'd start in the big European games, but he's, you know, one of the captains, one of the real leaders on and off the pitch. So,
and also just for a bit of a stat attack, Darcy is the only other player who's more than 250 Leinster caps.
all right.
There's no one else near. There's only 8 players on 200 or more, and Shaggy is only on 203.
All right.
So it's actually Darcy, Toner, Heaslip, Healy, Cullen, Carney, Shane Jennings, Shane Horgan. That's the 200 cappers. So he's joining a very exclusive club, which features, and he's probably going to have the cap record. He only needs 7 more caps after today, and you know he'll get that this season, no doubt. So Devin Toner, barring injury, is likely to be the Leinster cap record holder. How long ago is it? The Reggie Corrigan was the Leinster cap holder on 138 or something, and he held that for a little while. Actually, it is probably about 13, 14 years ago, in fairness, but it doesn't seem very long when you're really old.
Yeah, just the number of games that the provinces play nowadays compared to the days when Reggie would have been playing. You know, a really good season for him would have been playing maybe 6, 7, 8 games a season for Leinster, because he predates the Celtic League. Whereas now, you know, guys are playing 14, 15 games a season, and they're not even playing full seasons, you know, but they're playing a lot more games. So over the course of 10 years, they're going to hit 150 caps.
I always said at the time that it was the like of Luke Fitzgerald and Rob Kearney, their vintage was going to be the ones with the big caps, because that's when the league went to, you know, whatever it was, 11 teams, I think it was for a while. And that's when it really started, because guys who were older than them, like you say, they were around in times when there was a few Interpros and the Heineken Cup, and that was it. So, you know, but if you look at guys in England, there are guys with 300 and odd caps, you know, there are a few guys going around. And if you look at rugby league,
played, was it his 100 or his 150th game for Wasps there?
Wasps alone, yeah.
So just shows you how quickly they rack them up over there.
Stringer and Stringer would have started, and Donegal O'Connell would have started back in the days when there wasn't that many caps, and both of them got, I think one of them's over 400 professional rugby caps when you include their international and their club caps together. I think one of them hit 450 and the other one isn't that far behind. So
and Stringer has 98 Ireland caps. I think Donald O'Callaghan wouldn't be far off that number either.
Same, yeah, that's the same. and add them into their club caps. And it's a lot of banging around your body's got.
It is.
A lot of top class rugby.
Neither of them ever drank, which probably explains some of it, you know.
Speaking of drinking, have you been keeping up to date with the Barbarians England Farrago?
I heard that there's a possibility that the match might be called off because some fellas broke the
Curfew.
and they go out for a couple of walks.
Yeah, they went for a couple of strolls. Yeah, they broke the bubble. They burst the bubble. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The Bristol Bears have
I
been
see
making.
McFadden McFadden was drafted into it.
Yeah.
Bristol Bears have been making a joke because you know the way there was there was talk for a while that they might be drafted into the Premiership final because of the number of COVID cases with Wasps. Now that's not going to happen, but they were making a joke that we still have our suits on, so we're ready to go if you need us, Barbarians.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you never know. And sorry, there's a couple of things that we just going back to the game against Zebre. Obviously, Dan Levy is on the bench. We kind of had a false dawn there a few weeks ago when he was selected on the bench for the Leinster A game against Ulster A, but that he didn't appear on the bench for that game. But he's selected on the bench, so that's obviously great news after 18 long months for him out of the game.
It's great news for Leinster too. I mean, sport is such a short memory. Like, you know yourself, we're guilty of it ourselves. You know, you win a match, you're the best team in the world. You lose a match the next week, you're shit. Well, you know, you play a match and you play really well, and you're top of the world. You don't play for 18 months, and it's who? You know, it's like the guy was. You forget what a phenomenon the guy was when he was playing, both internationally and for Leinster. He's a freakish athlete, and he has that the old cliche of putting your head where nobody put their feet. He's got that as well. He gets stuck in anywhere and has no regard for his personal safety. So we'll have to see how he comes out of a long-term injury. But if he gets back anywhere near his best, it's great for Leinster and Ireland. And yeah, I for one, I'm looking forward to him running onto the field in the RDS and seeing what he's got and seeing how he looks. Worth the price of admission that we're not paying alone.
Yeah. And there's a couple of other selections that I thought was quite interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing Harry Byrne playing at 10, but I'm also, Leinster are still persistent with picking Kieran Frawley at 12, which again, I like that selection. I like him playing 12. We've seen him play obviously out half, we've seen him slot in a fullback, and like 12, they seem to be regularly picking him there. So I like that consistency that they are giving him a fair go at that inside centre position.
With what's his name, Hawkshaw on the bench, who's also a 10-12. You've got so many options. You can move Frawley in and bring Hawkshaw in.
On the hour, I think we'll see Hawkshaw come in at 12 and Frawley move back to fullback.
Could do that as well. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of that. I was thinking of you can move Frawley to 10, but you know maybe Harry's going to play 80 minutes. Who knows? But you've got so many options with players who can play 10, 12, and as you say, 15 as well for Kieran Frawley. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Although Jimmy O'Brien is such a young lad, unless he's going to be moved somewhere else, he'll be well able to go 80 minutes, I'd say, at fullback. So interesting, just to see where they all end up. Interesting to see what the team finishes.
Because here's the thing: Byrne, Hawkshaw, and Turner would have been the Grand Slam 10, 12, 13 from 2 seasons ago. Well, until Hawkshaw's injury, but they were the initial selections, if memory serves.
For under 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Scott Penny was in that team as well.
The Ireland under 20s, which was doing the Ireland under 20s, which are doing great guns. That tournament has been cancelled now. They've drawn a line through it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've done the hard work of beating England away.
It's like 73 all over.
That, exactly. Yeah. Well, the feast of rugby continues anyway. We'll come back to the other fixtures in the Pro 14 or Pro 12. But obviously, we take on Italy. This match was, if you remember back, was probably predated the lockdown when it was cancelled. We didn't obviously realise how long this thing was going to go on for, and when they decided to cancel it back in end of February, start of March. But we're obviously, as you said, we've recorded this on Thursday night, so we know what the team is. What do you think of the selection?
We recorded it Wednesday. We guessed it.
Oh, that would have been handy, wouldn't it? Yeah, we should have done that.
It was announced on Wednesday, actually, the Ireland team. So Leinster was announced today.
You know the way Gatland used to announce a team nearly on Monday.
Yeah.
I sort of a halfway house with Farrell, like he's just going, yeah, let's get on with it instead of cloak and dagger. You know, I mean, remember Joe Schmidt used to
Leave it
have
as
media,
late as possible.
media blackouts, and you know, had Stewart's inquiries in with the players of who was leaking it and all this kind of thing. So obviously Farrell doesn't seem to be that fussed if he's releasing the team at lunchtime on Wednesday.
No. Well, maybe that's why he's releasing it.
There's stricter regulations now about when teams have to be released for media maximization purposes.
Okay.
So what you'd have is Joe Schmidt releasing a team and then putting an entirely different team on the pitch.
He was too friendly with those GA coaches, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So what do you think of the team selection, lads? A few interesting ones in there. I think the back row is probably no great surprise to Leinster fans, but maybe some people mightn't have expected to see Will Connors get his first start.
Yeah, and Doris at 6. It seems to be becoming fashionable nowadays.
Personally, I'd swap Doris with Stander because I think Stander's a good 6. I think Doris is good. But, you know, there's nothing to say that they can't do those jobs anyway.
True.
Might happen during the game, Dave, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's a team that, you know, it has an unusual look to it. If you think about, if you go back 2 years to when we won the Grand Slam, and you look at this team now, it has an unusual look to it. But in terms of, you know, the players who are playing well, with the possible exception of Conor Murray, who I don't think his form is as bad as people think it is, you'd find it hard to argue that it's not a team selected on form.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Murray's in a terrible vein of form. He really is. He looks really
playing for a terrible coach.
Yeah, he looks ponderous. He just looks like his decision making is, I don't know what it is, but he's not the player he was anyway in 2018, I suppose.
He hasn't played a lot for Munster this season.
Yeah.
They've been giving Casey a bit of game time, certainly the last couple of games, and you know, like their interest in, say, the Pro 14 as it was last season kind of ended obviously at semi-final level.
They've had 2 games this season and they've started 1 each. So.
Sorry, say that again, Dave?
They've had 2 games this season and they've started 1 each.
I didn't think Murray played both games. I didn't think Murray started. I thought it was.
Did he not start the first game and Casey the second?
Oh, I thought Casey was too, but I could be wrong.
You could be right. I'm not gonna. It's not a cross I'm going to die on. But you know, apart from that, I mean, the guy I think who can be a bit cheesed off, but he'll probably get opportunities deeper in the tournament is Kieran Marmion, who's playing really, really well for Connacht.
And they seem to fancy Gibson Park, who didn't make the World Cup squad. Joe Schmidt didn't rate him, it seems, but you know, Cooney was ahead of him for the World Cup. Luke McGrath was ahead of him for the World Cup. Marmion was ahead of him for the World Cup. He seems to have leapfrogged all of them. And you know, well, maybe it's only maybe it's a temporary thing. Maybe he just wants to give him a run against Italy and see what he can do. But he's in a good vein of form though for Leinster.
The other side of it is, like you say, like in terms of some of the selections, experimental selections and things like that, it is Italy. You know, it's a game traditionally, even in the Six Nations, there's been a certain amount of not experimentation, well, playing with combinations, shall we say?
Yes, but in this case, we need a 5-pointer off Italy, and if we get it, we're in a chase for the title. You know, okay, France are playing us. We have to play France away, and England are playing Italy away.
Yeah.
But we will be, if we put up a 5-pointer here, I think we're a point ahead of England. So we actually don't need.
If we win both our games with bonus points,
we'll
win the championship.
Yeah, it's that simple.
England are on 15 points currently, and their maximum obviously is 20. We're on 9 points, so if we get,
we'll be up to 14. We'll be a point ahead of England. But my point is that this would be a game that you'd want to rack up a lot of points in, because if you rack up enough of them, you're really putting it up to England, and God knows what will happen. Italy might be at home, they might have a bit of wounded pride, and they might put it up to England, and maybe England won't be able to run up a big score. And if they don't, then all we'll need to do is win in Paris, and we're champs. You know, like you say, Jason. Either way, if we get 10 points, we can't be caught. However, getting 5 points in Paris is not necessarily an easy ask. Ask any Irish rugby player from the last 100 years. I know it's been easier recently, but you know, France have come back in the last year or two that back closer to their best. Having said that, I think you've been sending around stuff, Dave, where the LNR and the FFR have been at war, and no player will be allowed play in more than 3 games of
the only play 3 games
Nations Cup.
Each player. So there's there will be changes.
It's not going to affect us though, because that'll be their first game, so they'll probably throw out their best lads against us. But we'll see. We'll have a good warm up against Italy if if they don't beat us. We'll be in good fettle after playing Italy.
Is Jean Klein injured?
Don't know. Is he going to get near the Ireland team?
I was thinking that because he wasn't mentioned ever in relation to coming in and covering for Henderson, obviously missing out because of suspension, and then Ryan Baird being out injured. You know, it was Quinn Roux, or it was Delan, and it was Delan that made it onto the bench.
He got married. He got injured in the same game as Snyman, as far as I remember. But I didn't think his injury was that bad. I thought it was something to be over by now.
But the two of the controversial omissions from the World Cup squad. Obviously, one was Quinn Roux, and also Delan, and they're both back in the family fold, as it were.
Mm.
Yeah.
There certainly seems to Farrell seems to be kind of putting his own stamp on that squad.
Yeah.
And like even bringing in someone like Hugo Keenan, who kind of I know like you'd want to be fairly avid Leinster supporter to have heard of him prior to sort of the comeback after the lockdown. You know, he wouldn't have got too many starts in big games for Leinster, and all of a sudden he's starting in the Six Nations. Like, that's pretty meteoric.
It was a position where there were opportunities, though. Obviously, Rob Kearney retired. Jordan Lammer's injured. Keith Earls is injured. James Lowe hasn't qualified yet. Adia Loken's gone away. Craig Gilroy's form is off a cliff. Balakoon is injured. So there were, there's not too many fit back 3 players knocking around.
There's one in France, though, right?
Well,
he's one in France.
Yeah.
Dave Kearney is the one guy who's fit and not. He's probably the only spare back 3 player we have. So. But I think it's interesting, like John was saying earlier, about Stockdale been named fullback and Keenan been named on the wing. I think they might be wearing the jersey numbers, but I'd say they might switch a lot, because Stockdale is or certainly at his peak was the most lethal winger in world rugby at that point in time. And he's had a dip in form since, But if he gets his form back, that form was on the wing. It wasn't a fullback. So if you put him on the wing, cause havoc, and then have Hugo Keenan sweeping up behind, might make a bit more sense. We'll see. But it's going to be interesting because I think they're trying to find a way of getting Stockdale and Lowe into the same team.
And they're both number 11s,
Yeah.
Stockdale and Lowe. And also, have you noticed that when we were playing Larmour at fullback for Leinster, Keenan was 14, and then they swapped him around at one stage. But he's never been 11, you know. It's always been Lowe at 11, or maybe Keane Keller, or maybe whoever, Dave Carney this weekend. So left wing is an unlikely place for Hugo Keenan to be fetching up. So yeah, like you say, maybe he'll spend more time at 15. Maybe the 11 is just a number on the back. Yeah. So we shall see. It's interesting times for the left wing for Ireland. Like if Keith Earls comes back, I know he's must be almost more than half our age, so he's quite old for a rugby player. So if he comes back, he's probably still got a good year in him, 2 years in him at international level. You've got James Lowe and you've got Stockdale, who are all pretty much more 11s than they are anywhere else. So interesting that Hugo Keenan's starting at 11. Maybe he's a placeholder for James Lowe. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that's the plan. Put Lowe at 11 and Stockdale at 15.
Funny enough, I was talking about for Leinster, I was talking about the 10, 12, 13 from the Grand Slam under 20s team. The Italian out half from that team is starting for Italy.
Wow. So
he's had a fairly rapid rise as well. Garbisi, isn't that his name? He's a young guy to be starting the Six Nations match, but hopefully he has some luck, but not much.
Yeah, hopefully he looks good when he's doing his hair.
I've always felt it was the one thing that really held back Italian rugby since the retirement of Diego Dominguez. They haven't really had a go-to guy at out half.
Nope.
And they seem to go for well, not all the time, obviously, but a couple of times they went for ex-Aussie NRL players that had no tactical awareness for rugby union whatsoever, with the exception that they played at a very high level of rugby league.
Yeah, they've never replaced Dominguez. Never. No. I mean, there's guys like Tommaso Allen was in there. What's his name? McKinley was in there for a little bit even. They had Carlo Cana and the guy before that. I think he was a Kiwi. Anyway. Yeah. But they've had guys who weren't. They weren't guys who you were going to confident that you were going to pick for the next 10 matches. You know.
Yeah.
No, very cool. And they have a guy playing for them from Gloucester who looks a good player. Is he a back rower guy? Can't remember his name.
Oh, yeah, I know the guy you mean.
They have a couple of guys. I mean, what's his name? The fullback that impressed us maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He's back on the scene. I can't remember his name now.
Minozzi or something.
Huh? Minozzi. Yeah, Minozzi. You know, you're right. He's back on the scene as well. He's playing his rugby in England now. So they have players, and obviously they're going to have a good pack because they always have a good pack. But it's always been tying all the bits together. They never had the control at halfback to tie it all together. I'm sure they're hoping that this guy will be the guy that for the next 20 internationals will be the guy who'll be their go-to guy and tie it all together.
They kind of have to stick. They kind of have to stick with him and let him make mistakes and just get the experience. But like before we started, I was looking back over just to see how the Italian clubs were doing so far in the league. Like obviously this year it's only started. They've played 4 games and lost all 4, so that's in the Pro 12. But last season, Treviso won 6 and drew 1, lost 8. So they finished 5th in their conference. I guess that they would have played Zebre quite a few times towards the end of the season to make up fixtures. So maybe that might have boosted their win-loss ratio. But still, winning 6 of their 15 games is not a bad record, really.
No, and the year before was probably a better reflection because we had a full season then and they got to the playoffs.
And controversially,
Exactly the previous year, yeah.
Yeah, because that was a full season. They got to the playoffs then. So there are development. I mean, Italian rugby is developing. I mean, it's a process. I mean, you're trying to hothouse an entire nation, you know? It's not something you can just suddenly do and say, Italy, we now require you to be good at rugby. It's a process.
Unfortunately, they were in the 90s, and that team just got way too old, and no one come in to replace them. And like, you know, if you think back, there was more of a case for Ireland being kicked out of the Five Nations in the 90s and bring Italy in. You know, there would have been a very strong case if someone wanted to argue that.
Yes, we went a whole decade when I think we had in 10 years we finished bottom 7 or 8 times. We got the wooden spoon 5 times.
Yeah, and I think we won 10 games in 10 seasons.
Yeah,
I did. I checked it about a year ago.
Well, do you remember, Jason? Do you remember when we beat Wales in Cardiff Arms Park on Eric Elwood's debut? And it was the first international match that Nick Popplewell had won.
Yeah.
For Ireland. And the guy was like one of Ireland's great players, and he'd gone a whole career without winning a match.
I know.
Played for the Lions and everything.
First Five Nations game.
Again, but again, going back to the kind of listening to other podcasts. I was listening to one today, and you know, it was as though, you know, this team is just going to be beaten, and it mightn't be beaten by Italy, but definitely beaten by France. Whereas if you look at, like, we beat Scotland, we beat Wales. Wales got to the semi-final of the World Cup a year ago, and we were beaten. Okay, I mean, we made 2 absolutely horrendous errors that England capitalised on and won in their own backyard. The team, by the way, that got to the World Cup final, and they beat us 24-12. Now, they probably should have beaten us by more, but they didn't. They beat us by 12 points. I think we denied them a bonus point.
14 points.
And 14 points were, you know, Stockdale made an absolute howler, and so did Sexton. So, you know, like, they weren't hockeyed out the door. And, you know, they were very, very good. Okay, they still have a lot of work to do to beat France by a bonus point win in France, for sure. But like, where every cent counts, if the IRFU can leapfrog and get into even 3rd position in the table and get some readies, you know, that's going to be a big fill up for their coffers.
Long term as well. I mean, we're at the start of a cycle now. I mean, if you're one of those who believes the World Cup is a thing, we're at the start of a cycle. I mean, 2018 was, or 2019, the last World Cup was the end of 2 campaigns for pretty much the same team. That team has to roll over. We have to start again. We have to start with new players. New guys have to come in. A lot of guys retired. There's going to be some guys who probably retire at the end of the Lions tour if they don't make it, kind of thing. So, you know, this is a process. I mean, I don't expect much, nor do I want much. Well, I also want to win, but I don't want much out of Ireland this year or next, to be honest with you. I just want to see progress.
Yeah. Like, I know we've had injuries and I know we've had retirements, but just looking at the team that's selected compared to, say, what was beaten a year ago by New Zealand, you know, there's you know, certainly from that time, you know, there was great calls for, they must bring Conway, and like, we've kind of dismantled the back row. We brought in 2 new guys. The second row looks new, you know, bringing Ryan and Byrne in. I know, again, there has been injuries, but the likelihood is that Ryan Baird might have got his first cap in this game. You know, even the back line, you're bringing in Conway onto the wing and Hugo Keenan on the other wing and moving Stockdale to full back. Like, they are kind of trying to, you know, develop and bring in new blood into that team that it needed to be done. But, you know, you can't throw out the entire bathwater.
No, I wouldn't recommend that at all. And I think it's good that there's kind of a core to that team as well. I mean, you look at Cian Healy, Andrew Porter is kind of an experienced player at this stage. Still there. CJ Sanders still there. Sexton is still there. Conor Murray's still there. Bundy Aki and Ringrose are still there. So there is a core to build around.
Anyway, boys, just before I see time is running out on the call, so just very briefly, I see the ladies team has had it run into a bit of difficulty. I think there's a couple of players out sick, so hopefully they're not COVID positive, that it's just a precaution.
I saw the Irish women's team named earlier today. I didn't know that there was guys
Yeah, they had to
girls were unavailable for selection.
they had to rejig it. I think 3 of them
All
had
right,
to cry
since
off.
it was named, has it?
There was some sort of
That's unfortunate.
issues with their tests. I'm not sure if they were positive, but they were, you know, there was concerns about the tests.
Yeah, it's just
I
that there
think
was a
that-
couple of players in the team I was looking forward to seeing. Shall we see anyway?
Yeah. And one other thing before we do go, Monday night sees the first Monday night rugby of the Pro 12, Munster take on Cardiff. I'm looking forward to that. So it's going to be absolute rugby feast, games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday.
Till end of the way. Don't get me started.
Exactly. Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks very much. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook and Twitter, please give us a subscription and a like and a thumbs up. Cheers.